Great, thanks very much for joining us this morning. I am delighted to welcome Sean from Bridgit and Dan from Myton Hospice. So Sean's going to tell us more about Bridgit and how it works, and Dan is the perfect case study. So Dan's Myton Hospice have actually been using the service, so he's going to share his experiences of using the facility. So I'm going to hand over straight away because these guys know way more about it than I do. So if you, and also just if you've got any questions, pop them in the chat box, or if you want to just keep a track of them, and Sean and Dan will answer them after the session, and you can just take your mics off. But if you can just keep yourself on mute during the presentation, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much, Sally. And yeah, good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all. First, I'd say a huge thank you to Sally and the MuchLoved team for having us today. We're a pretty new startup. You may have seen us on LinkedIn a little bit more recently. So it's great to have this opportunity to talk with you all and share a bit more about what we're doing. There's going to be 4 parts to the session. We're going to start with a background about Bridgit. So sort of why do we exist? Where did it all come from? Then we'll get into concrete information about how it works and how much it costs. Get straight to the point on that front because I know it's normally a pretty early question. Then Dan's going to talk a bit about his experiences with Bridgit and hopefully say some nice things about us. And then we'll have a bit of a wrap up and Q&A session as well. So as Sally mentioned, feel free to drop questions in the chat as we go. If it makes sense and we see them, we'll answer them on as we go, but otherwise we'll sweep up through in the Q&A section. So in terms of the background, I'm sure I don't really need to emphasize this point too much to you guys on the call, but since COVID and then cost of living, it feels like there's been some strong headwinds everywhere really, and a lot of financial uncertainty, and it's hit charities hard in recent years. And ultimately the impact of this is that charities are being asked to do more with less. So we've got this kind of pressure on services, but pressure on funding as well, as you all know about. And at the same time, the number of tools that we're relying on is growing. So there's this kind of explosion of digital platforms, and with it a bunch of data that we have to wrangle. And if it feels like you're sort of chasing your tail and trying to keep up with platforms that are popping up every week, you're not far wrong. There is a proliferation of new tools and services. And over the last couple of years, we've spoken to hundreds of charities about the tools they use, and in many cases they're processing data from sort of 30 different places on a weekly or monthly basis. Unfortunately, what this means is in most instances the data is very disconnected. It's not, systems don't talk to one another, and that means we've got fragmented data, and the resultant kind of admin from that is huge, and it's eating up precious time, which we have less and less of. And there's human error that comes from it, but most importantly, the kind of ultimate impact is that it damages acquisition, retention, lifetime value, and staff morale. And I've really kind of emphasized the staff morale piece because the kind of starting point for Bridgit was we conducted a series of interviews with charities prior to Bridgit's inception and asked them what their main pain points were, and everybody was talking about data and having to, you know, working in fundraising, wanting to build relationships and raise money, but spending too much time wrangling spreadsheets and renaming columns and just being buried under that kind of work. So that staff morale is a real kind of issue, and many people we've spoken to spend sort of a day a week on that kind of task. So you can see how that is making our staff not very happy at all. But the good news is that there are progressive teams that have escaped this trap. They've kind of broken the mold and they're making data work for them. And full disclosure, I'm not necessarily talking about charities that we work with that use Bridgit. There are a rare breed of charities that have managed to kind of go ahead and build bespoke systems and got very sophisticated processes in place to automate this and take away that heavy data admin lift. But unfortunately, those charities mostly have depended on having in-house technical expertise, so kind of like unicorn staff who just understand how to build automations, or they're outsourcing it to consultants. And the reality is that for 99% of charities, they haven't got the resources to do this. So that's why the norm is the kind of the messy situation that we see here, lots and lots of manual processes for different platforms. But for those that do manage to kind of break the mold and get to that better place, they can unlock it's basically a big game changer. And I kind of like to think of this as a bit like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So at the bottom, you have your platforms that everybody uses. In some cases, you have platforms that you've been signed up to, you receive data or income from that you don't even know about. So you've got your base of platforms. And then the bit above that obviously we're excited about is the integration layer. And what that enables is you to do 90% less manual data admin, which gives you your happier staff. And ultimately, it gives you that clean data. And those three things are really the foundation for supported care excellence. And this cycle here, I think, is really important because without these things, you can't get into this process of action. So like you're putting out your campaigns, getting the data in an organized way, learning from that, and then informing your future actions. And that's when we really start to see that kind of iterative improvement. And a key part of that integration layer is automating the really boring stuff. And when we speak to charities about this, it can be quite a difficult conversation. And Dan and I have spent quite a while getting to grips with the different steps you have to go through to get your data in a good place. But some examples are things like changing date formats, inputting campaign codes, capitalizing names, validating addresses, renaming columns, and then filtering out GDPR consents to make sure that you're contacting those that you can contact. So this is where Bridgit comes in. So we automate lots of these manual data admin processes to save charities loads and loads of time. So in terms of how it works, the first thing I'll say is that with Bridgit, what you have is you're moving data from a source to a destination. And you can set up what we call a bridge in 4 steps. The first one is choosing your source. So here in this example, we're connecting MuchLoved. And to connect MuchLoved, you need an API key and an app ID, which Sally and the team can provide you with. Then you choose a destination. And so in Bridgit, there are going to be 3 destinations. The first is a spreadsheet. And that is effectively building a spreadsheet that is compatible with your CRM. So all of the columns will match what your CRM needs, and the data is cleaned and transformed and set in such a way that it works with that CRM. The second destination is an API endpoint. So for more tech-savvy charities, we can land the data at an API that you can pull at a frequency that you need. And the third option is going direct to the CRM. So this is in beta, and I'll touch more on this in a moment, but this is effectively setting up an end-to-end flow of data or a bridge from MuchLoved, for example, all the way through to your CRM. The third step in setting up a bridge is what I'll say is in this example here, before I move on, the destination we're choosing is a spreadsheet, a custom spreadsheet for your CRM. Once you've chosen that, what we're doing here in this example is the columns on the left are all of the data points that are available in MuchLoved in this example. And what we're doing on the right is building out all of the columns that your CRM needs in that spreadsheet for one quick upload. And as we do this, we set a series of transformations. So the things that I mentioned, title case, filtering out GDPR consents. There are a bunch of different rules and transformations that you can set. And what this is doing is building out that spreadsheet so that it just squirts straight through to your CRM. And then finally, we set a schedule for that. So you're going to name your bridge, give it a description, and then, for example, you can choose to run it at 1 a.m. every night, and that will pull the data for the last 24 hours, land it in that spreadsheet as you need, send you an email to let you know that it's ready, and then you can go ahead and just squirt that data straight through into your CRM with no kind of manual wrangling of that data. And once that's done, that's it. It's set and forget. So you'll receive that data on a daily basis, as I mentioned, and then you can just plug it straight into your CRM. In terms of our plans, there are 3 tiers. And so I mentioned the 3 types of destination. We have our spreadsheet, which is £49 a month, and that's going to save you an awful lot of time. We have the API plan at £99 a month, and then the CRM plan at £299. So we're working with a few charities on the CRM plan, which will allow you to map it all the way through. But for the moment, our charities that are kind of early adopters, including Dan at Myton, are on the spreadsheet plan, getting that data ready to be squirted through to your CRM. And because we are pretty early stage, our real focus at the moment is learning from charities. And so trying to remove all risks so that charities can try this really easily, set up a bridge, see if it gives them value, and then decide whether it's worth paying for. So there's a few things we're doing. So you can have a 14-day free trial. You don't need to add a card or anything like that. And if you need different transformations or rules or some feature that will give you back a lot more of your time, tell us, and we're very reactive to that. We're going to try and set that up so that it works for you. But ultimately, there's no need to enter cards, and if you don't see any results, then you won't be charged at all. So I'll stop talking now. And I'm going to invite Dan in to tell us a bit about how it's gone.
Hello, good morning all. Yeah, I'm Dan. I'm the Digital Marketing Manager at the Myton Hospices. I've been here for 11 years and we've been working with Bridgit for several months now. And not just because Sean's on the call, I can actually only say good things, which is really good to know. They've been incredibly reactive and helpful and saves our donor and supporter care team hours already. And that's just from the MuchLoved imports alone, which consist of 2 separate mappings, one for the money and then one for our supporter data. And they now run on an automated schedule. So that pulls the data directly from MuchLoved, and then that comes through to Bridgit, which then transforms, and then our donor and supporter care team can import that, which previously they'd had to manually export that from MuchLoved, then make changes in a spreadsheet, then import that, and there'll still probably be some issues. That obviously takes quite a bit of time, and there's always the risk of human error there. So reducing that's really important to us. And excitingly for our next steps, we've been working with Sean and the guys to take advantage of DonorFlex's API. So as Sean mentioned previously, that will then pull from MuchLoved on a schedule, go through Bridgit and transform, and then automatically go directly into our CRM, which again would be really helpful for us, and then reduce a lot of manpower hours for the donor and support care team, really freeing their time up to do what they need to do. Alongside that as well, we're also looking at our fundraising data and working with the team to sort out our enthused data. So those will go through Bridgit also, again, really reducing the time and making sure that that data is really good once it goes into our CRM. And then what I can end on is all I can say is my personal experience with Sean and the team is just that they've been really good to work with. They really understand the non-profit sector and that no 2 charities are the same. They've been really quick to learn and identify any potential issues, and they really welcome feedback or any custom work that you guys need. So yeah, I can just recommend getting in touch with them, giving it a trial. It's like having a small team of API developers at your fingertips without the very costly agency fees or contractor fees. And on that note, I'll pass it back to Sean.
Phew. Thanks, Dan. I appreciate that. Okay. There's a couple of things I'll just want to close on really, and then we'll open up for questions. Something that we're really excited about as a team, and I think sets Bridgit apart and to kind of other offerings at the moment, is that until now, if you were a charity trying to make your platforms talk to one another and streamline these processes, your only real option was to bring in consultants, unless you were lucky enough to have some very technical people in-house. And that's just not accessible to most charities. So Bridgit changes that. And we designed it to be usable, affordable, and set up in minutes by you without needing to write code or hire anybody. So we think this is pretty transformational for the sector. And you may have guessed it, but the reason we're called Bridgit is not just because of the pun about bridges and data. It's a name deliberately because we're going to be soon embedding AI. And what that means is that mapping and transformation process is going to become a lot easier. And Bridgit will become your kind of data and integration assistant that you can just talk to, tell it what you're trying to achieve. It will tutor you and guide you into kind of the best practice, and it will then set up those bridges for you and get the data from your sources to the destination that you need it to and in the format that you need it. So this is what we're building towards in the very near future. We're not quite there yet though. So I have a gift for you guys on this call today. That implementation process does take a couple of days. So what we're looking to do is between now and Christmas, we have 4 spaces left on a program where basically we come in and we set up the bridges for you. We go in, we'll talk to you and understand your needs, but we'll do the legwork of actually setting it all up, effectively doing what our AI functionality will do in the future. The reason we're doing this is because it's really useful for us to continue learning what charities need and building up our knowledge base. but also it just takes away some of that friction and hopefully encourages some early charities to come and give it a try. Because we're not as fast as AI, we do only have a maximum 4 spaces before Christmas. So take a look. You can scan this QR code and book a call with us, or just drop us an email, and we'll try to get you into one of those spots before Christmas. And then all of that kind of data that hopefully you'll be getting from your campaigns through Christmas will be in a much nicer place for when you're trying to organise it and everything's a bit manic over the giving season. Okay, I'll open the floor to questions. So I appreciate that was quite a lot in a short space of time, but does anybody have any questions?
Feels like an offer too good to pass up. So I hope a couple of the charities on this call are willing to take it up, but if not, we'll definitely publicise that more widely for you via our next newsletter. So get in there first if you're on a call today. So Dan, I wanted to ask you, how often do you pull the data? Is it something that you do daily?
So there's 2 different ones. We've got our money import, which comes in twice a month, and then our supporter data, which is twice a week, and that's just for MuchLoved. The fundraising data that we're looking at, that's daily because that reconciles with our Stripe account. So yeah, at the moment there's daily imports that are going to be replaced by Bridgit, hopefully.
And what do you think the team are going to do with the extra time that they have? I'm hoping stewardship is on the horizon.
Can't possibly answer for them, but yes, hopefully getting back to what we all want to do, which is supporting the charity, raising money and looking after our supporters.
Excellent. Anyone got any questions? Feel free to pop yourself off mute and ask Sean or Dan questions. Good opportunity to ask in person after we're here. I know there's some of the MuchLoved team. Don't be shy. You're very welcome to ask questions too. If you think of something that might be relevant to one of our partners.
Rob's typing.
Yes. So what, Dan, just going back, what within the data that you are pulling through, what does that include? If you can give us a bit more detail.
Yeah, so our payment data from MuchLoved is all of the donations that have gone onto a tribute page, and then the supporter data is more around the communications preferences around the donors. So being able to communicate with them in the future, creating records within DonorFlex of that supporter, if they have given us the consent to obviously go ahead and speak to them in the future, whether that be SMS or email.
And you're pulling in tribute information as well, the information about the person that's created the pages.
Yep, so that all goes and sits alongside the main profile of the person who's created that tribute page, and then has all the links back to the tribute page and set as a URL within the profile.
So Rob's asked the question, which was, what made you try and solve this problem? And it's a bit of a long story, but I'll give you the abridged version. In 2020, I had started a donation platform called Ripples, which was about micro donations, and we raised a modest amount of money for charities, and it didn't really scale, so we kind of we sadly shut that down. But as part of that, lots of charities were reluctant. We had over 100 charities on the platform, but lots of charities were reluctant to work with us because they couldn't face bringing on another data source where they'd have to wrangle the data from and get it into their CRM. Particularly for large charities, it was just a non-starter. But then after that, as I said, we conducted this big research project about problems that charities were facing, and this issue just kept coming up over and over and over again. And it, coming from kind of one foot in the charity sector and one out of it, it seemed crazy that this much time was being spent on data admin, and it felt like there could be a technology solution, but it also felt like something that CRMs would be solving. But then when we dug deeper into it, it just became clear that it's a hard problem to solve, and that actually it needed its own integration layer to have a chance at solving it. CRMs do so much great stuff in terms of that customer or donor relationship, then they have to focus on that. And the ever-changing nature of the platforms and APIs changing, things like that, meant that it was a big enough job on its own. And so when we kind of went back to those charities we interviewed about the concept, everybody was really encouraging about it, and so the reaction was really good. Okay. There's a question for you here as well, Dan.
Yep.
What has been the biggest blocker to bringing in Bridgit, and how did you overcome it?
Oh, in terms of blockers, I don't think there's ever been anything that I'd put down as a blocker. There's been some small teething issues, but the team have always been really reactive to go and solve them. And they're more just learning about how we use the data, because we might use it completely different to how another hospices is using the MuchLoved data, and we might be storing it on DonorFlex slightly different. So what the team initially thought was best practice or best process to do, we and our team were just using things slightly different. So we might be recording things in slightly different places or pulling the data from a different area within MuchLoved. And then that's where they've been really good. So they've sat down and gone, okay, well, how does this work for you? We can build something custom that then works perfect for you guys. We know that that's not going to work for everyone, but let's get it working for you. And I think that's been the greatest thing with working with Bridgit. Everything's been very personalized to us. And I've worked with a lot of companies over the years that claim to understand the non-profit sector and claims to understand charities. And it's very much of an out-of-box solution here. That's how it's going to work. And this is what you have to deal with, where this feels like a really personalized touch and really want to get us and how the data works for us.
Yeah. I think that really speaks to why it's such a challenge and why it hasn't been solved so far, and why advancing technologies will help with it as well. Because just this morning, I had an early call with another hospice, actually, who also were taking data from MuchLoved to DonorFlex. So very similar situation to Dan and the team. But they have a quirk in the way that they process data, and that gift aid donations go into a different line, and it gets recorded as a whole other thing. It gets linked back to the donor in a certain way with a soft credit, but it means that we have to split out the gift aid and the actual donation into two separate rows in the data. And so this was just unexpected. And so we had a conversation with that charity about, okay, so why do you do that? And the way we've built Bridgit is that it's configurable so that we can handle all of these different cases rather than forcing it to be a certain, forcing the data processing to be a certain way. And yeah, it's tricky, but once you set it up, once you've got through that period of understanding what you need, the bridge is there and it works every day.
Can I just ask a question
Yes,
for Sean, actually? Does Bridgit work with all sort of CRMs or formats? Do you know what I mean? Or are there sort of CRM systems that you struggle with specifically?
Yeah, so the first thing to say, it's a great question. The first thing to say is that our CRM plan, which squirts data straight into the CRM, isn't live yet. So we're testing with a few charities. We're focused on Salesforce at the moment, and as Dan mentioned, DonorFlex. But it's a hard problem to solve because everybody's CRM is configured differently. So we have to figure out how to make the mapping process configurable. So that's a work in progress. But the spreadsheet upload, you can configure that spreadsheet in whatever way your CRM requires, which gives you that flexibility so that it's useful for everybody. And when we originally kind of conceptualized Bridgit, we were only really looking at the CRM, the end-to-end piece, as the end goal, the dream state. But what we realized is, well, two things. One is it's a really, really hard problem to solve. And two is that charities actually, the bulk of the work is transforming the data. So if we can get it into a spreadsheet that's ready to upload, we cut out most of the work, and actually charities are quite happy with that step change on its own. And then the other thing is that they quite like having a human in the loop, so they can cast an eye over it. Maybe there's some things that we can't do, and it requires a human to have a quick scan and input something. So we're at the spreadsheet plan now, and that theoretically will work with every CRM because the spreadsheet can be custom built each time. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. And also there's quite a lot of there's a few databases that we have API integration with, but there's plenty that we don't, that isn't available, or they haven't got the resources to develop. So yeah, this looks like a good solution. So Kate's asked, how do you manage potential duplication of customer records?
Yeah, great question. So at the moment, we tend to not really get involved in the deduplication process, and we leave it to the CRM. So at the point of ingestion of that, your exceptions or your duplications will be flagged up. So at the moment, we don't become involved in that. In that third phase of the CRM plan, it's going to be possible then that we'll be able to pull in donor records as we go, and only with that functionality can we actually start to look at deduplication. And when we release that, there'll be the ability to do some of that deduplication inside Bridgit so that you don't depend on your CRM. Because we have heard from charities that, some CRMs, the deduplication functionality isn't working for them for one reason or another. So that's where we want to be able to pull that data back in and start to help with that. But as of today, we don't really become involved in duplication.
Great, thank you. Just a clarification, Rob's asked what CRM Catherine uses, but Catherine works for MuchLoved, so she's asking on behalf of the partners that she's representing, and they use all kinds of different CRMs. So yeah, excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining us this morning.